it's Sarah, and today I'm going to be talking about the best middle grade of 2019. Part of my 2019 reading recap. If you missed the last video in this series, I will link it up in the cards for you guys. Additionally, links to all videos in this series will be in the description down below as they are released. As you may have noticed from the title, this video is a genre-specific video. I was going through all of the books that I read this year and what my favorite books were, and they all ended up being adult high fantasy. But I just didn't feel like it was fair to all of the other genres that I read this year, so I decided to make some genre-specific videos. So this video is going to be talking about the best and the most surprising middle grade books that I read in 2019. Timestamps are in the description of the video, so feel free to jump around. But we're gonna start with the most surprising middle grade books that I read in 2019. So we're gonna start this video off with The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. First of all, you have to understand that I am not the biggest fan of Neil Gaiman, especially his adult fantasy. I just find it kind of boring. So I was surprised that when I ended up really enjoying his middle grade, especially The Graveyard Book. The Graveyard Book is about a boy called Nobody Owens, whose family was all murdered when he was really young, and he was raised by ghosts in a graveyard. So he lives in a graveyard, he can see ghosts, and it's just kind of like this whimsical fantasy book, but it has kind of this darker side to it because it's really close to death, and I enjoyed every second of it. It's definitely not like my favorite middle grade of all time, but I didn't expect very much from this book going into it, and it exceeded all my expectations, so I ended up giving it 4 stars. The next book on this list is The Lightning Thief by Rick Riordan. So I actually did not read the Percy Jackson series as a child, so I decided to pick up the Percy Jackson series this year, and I started with The Lightning Thief, of course, and it surprised me by how good it was. Like, I was expecting it to be kind of like a typical middle grade novel, but I ended up really loving Percy Jackson as a character. Despite him being such an immature little boy, I loved him as a character, and I loved like all of the situations that he was in and the adventures that he goes on. I think it was just such a fun book to read, and while I did also read Sea of Monsters later on and didn't love it as much as I wanted to, I did really enjoy The Lightning Thief, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. So now we're gonna move on to the best middle grade that I read in 2019, and I have to start with the His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman, which includes The Golden Compass, The Subtle Knife, and The Amber Spyglass. So I feel like I've talked about this series a lot on my channel because I also did not read this series as a child, and I really wish that I had, because I feel like if I read this as a child, I would have absolutely loved it. It would have been one of my favorite series of all times, and it would have been such a nostalgic read because I love the character of Lyra. Lyra is the main character in this book, and I absolutely love all of the ways she kind of like butts her nose into what the adults are doing and everything like that. I also really love Pantalaimon, and I love that world building because it has such different world building than I was expecting, because Pantalaimon is a demon, and like they live in a world where demons live outside of your body, but ours, I guess, live inside of our body, sort of. It's very interesting. The way the world building lends to the plot really well is also incredibly interesting, and I love that about the series. I also really loved that it delves into the many worlds trope later on in the series, which is one of my favorite tropes in fantasy and sci-fi, so I absolutely love that. And while this is not one of my favorite series of all times, I think probably because I read it as an adult and not as a child, I still really enjoyed it. I ended up giving The Golden Compass and The Subtle Knife 4.5 stars each, and The Amber Spyglass 3.5 stars. The next book on this list is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So on a complete whim, I decided to pick up the audiobook for this, and I absolutely loved it. I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. It's just such a whimsical story, but there's also a darker nature to it that really drew me into the story, and I ended up enjoying it way more than I was expecting to, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. And the last book on this list is Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. This book is another audiobook that I decided to pick up on a complete whim and absolutely fell in love with. I love Peter Pan as a character. He is such an interesting character, partially because he never grows up, but also the way that he treats Wendy, the way that he goes about and does things, especially with the Lost Boys and things like that. I absolutely loved all of his antics, and of course Tinkerbell and Wendy are fantastic also, and I really enjoyed this book a lot more than I was expecting to also, and I ended up giving it 5 stars. So those are all the books on this list. Let me know down in the comments if you've read these books. I would love to discuss with you guys. I'm planning on posting at least 4 videos a week in the month of December, so consider subscribing. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in this description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!